Welcome to the Healers Café, conversations on health and healing with Dr. Manon.
So welcome to the Healers Café. And today I have with me Rev Connie Habash, and she is a licensed marriage and family therapist, a yoga and meditation teacher, an ecotherapist, an interfaith minister, and also the author of Awakening from Anxiety, a spiritual guide to living a more calm, confident, and courageous life. So I really want to welcome you to this show, and let's start by what got you into this path.
Well, I guess that goes back into my childhood, dealing with anxiety, dealing with shyness, having a hard time feeling confident in front of other people, especially my peers, and being an introvert and a highly sensitive person. That the world, I didn't know it back then, obviously, when you're a child, of course, back then, no one knew about the term highly sensitive person or an empath, someone who feels very deeply the energy of the world and of other people. But I clearly was and needed a lot of alone time. And I guess it was fortunate that I was an only child because I got a lot of alone time. But and I didn't know back then what I was dealing with was anxiety. I really didn't understand that. I just thought, oh, I'm shy and not too comfortable with my peers yet. I had friends, of course, and all that, but and so over the years, it would show up in different ways. So I got over my fear of speaking in public, but then it would show up in fear of being the passenger in a car or fear of flying. And anxiety is more of when you're kind of ruminating over that, or it's sort of present with you more often than not during the day and for a period of time. It's not just a fear that comes and goes. Like recently I've had a little fear of certain crawly bugs outside, but that comes and goes. Like if I don't see them, that's fine. But anxiety is a little bit more persistent and kind of colors everything you do. And so I would notice for weeks leading up to a flight, if I had to take a flight, I just start to get worse and worse and worse. Like, okay, I got to manage this, and started to discover not only through my own, inner work and therapy and all that, but through taking a fear of flying course, through a number of different spiritual paths that I've journeyed on and learning from a lot of amazing teachers out there. These 7 principles or keys that I talk about in the book, and that they make a huge difference in my life, especially in the times we're currently living in, right?
Yeah.
To find a sense of calm in the storm, that even when you're in a hurricane, there's always the eye of the hurricane. So I'm always, centering and finding that eye of the hurricane in me in the midst of all of this. And that's how the book was born out of all of that.
Right. Okay. And then what are the main that you can share? I'm not asking you to read the entire book here, because and people will be able to have access to it. There'll be a link where they can find out where to get it. But what are the main things where you've tied in sort of spirituality, meditation, and the understanding of anxiety? Like how manageable is that in your experience?
Well, it takes definitely a mindset, a shift in our perception and our shift of in how we look at, say, certain practices that we expect to be calming, like meditation, yoga, etc. So a lot of us, I mean, I do that. I practice all of that, and that's certainly part of my self-care. But many of us have sought out those experiences and practices so that we can calm that anxiety. And it's really great while we're on the mat and laying in shavasana, or if we happen to be able to get into a deeper state of meditation. And then, about 10, 15, 20 minutes, an hour or two after you're done with your yoga class or whatever it is, or you're done praying or chanting, it all comes back again. And So first of all, that those things are important, but they're necessary, but probably not sufficient to changing a pattern of anxiety within us. We need to be able to deal with actually what's going on in our consciousness and our thoughts, not just calming, soothing practices. Um, and that we don't, to not judge ourselves, especially as people on the spiritual path who are really committed to, like, okay, inner peace and all of that, to not judge ourselves when the anxiety comes up. Because one of the things that I focus on in the book and that I work with my clients on is that don't expect your anxiety to completely go away, because that's a real setup.
Right.
If it goes away for a while and you think, I've got it licked, and then it comes back, you think, oh my God, what did I do wrong? Like, I've messed up again, or I've backslid, or obviously all the work I did before didn't matter, or I must not be as evolved as I thought I was, or any of those like judgments.
Right.
Anxiety is going to arise from time to time because we're humans and it's a human emotion. So what I'm working people toward is resilience and being able to feel confident that, oh, now I know exactly what to do when anxiety arises. Now I know how to welcome it in and work through it and allow it to move through like a wave in this conscious way. And I have these practices in which I can consciously do that, so that anxiety becomes more of it's like I talk about the title, awakening from anxiety is not just getting over your anxiety or releasing your anxiety. It's about experiencing a spiritual awakening through the process of what the anxiety brings as sort of a gift. It's not pleasant at first, but there's, one of the things I talk about is we're learning to listen to the anxiety or any emotion. It could be anger, it could be grief. As a teacher, it's bringing wisdom, it's bringing guidance, it's bringing a sense of direction, it's letting you know what matters, what's important, where you need to set a boundary, etc. So that's sort of the general premise of the book, is looking at anxiety not as a horrible problem that you've got to get rid of, but as something as part of the human condition that you can learn to be resilient with and learn to ride the waves into greater and greater personal growth and spiritual awakening.
Yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense what you're saying to me, as a general way also of looking at many diseases, or not getting stuck in a fight against the symptoms or against the body. It's more like going, okay, what's it telling me? And learning to listen. Why is it there? Or why is it surfacing? What triggers this or that? Let's say, like, more inflammation or all of that. Just noticing it and working with it like a teacher, and then course correcting, or learning better boundaries, sometimes, or learning to say no, or sometimes learning to say yes.
Yeah, right.
Whatever it might be, right? Yeah. So it's interesting that you're saying, like, anxiety, we can treat it like a friend. I mean, it's there, and we need it. It'll come, it'll go, and we can work alongside it as a teacher for greater consciousness.
Absolutely. One of the sections in the book, I talk about the mistakes that I think spiritual people make in response to their anxiety. And what you were talking about it being, a teacher, right? Which was what I was saying as well. It also brings up that some people one of the spiritual mistakes is the misunderstanding of the law of attraction. A lot of people in spiritual communities have heard of law of attraction, where your thoughts create your reality, that kind of idea. And I'm sure you've seen this in your practice, Dr. M, that people who ascribe to that tend to blame themselves,
right,
and attack themselves for getting ill or having the anxiety. Like, I manifested that, I created that, and I'm a mess. I'm like, I blew it. I obviously have messed up thoughts and all of that. And that does nothing really but create more anxiety. But also that there's, I think people really need to understand that concept a little bit more deeply, that not, first of all, not every thought that we have is going to create something. It takes a lot more thoughts than that. In fact, when I took the fear of flying training, that I went to a clinic here in San Francisco. They reminded us that, you may be having fears about the plane crashing, but there's a lot of other people on the plane that are very clear that the plane is going to land safely. And so that was really calming to me to realize, okay, not every thought that I have is going to create something bad. And whatever symptom I have, whether it's physical or emotional, isn't necessarily me, messing up with all of my thoughts. But that we're not there, and there are certainly things that happen to us that are not in our control, right? Like what's going on with the pandemic, not really, or the fires going on. It's not in our control. Now we could say, okay, we contributed to some of that. I guess we could have that discussion, but ultimately it's really that our thoughts are creating our experience of reality.
Right.
So depending on how we're thinking about all these experiences we're going through will determine whether we experience a whole lot of anxiety about them or not. And that's how I shift people into, it's like, okay, you can influence your experience of things, but you didn't, you're not, like, if you have cancer or something like that, don't beat yourself up. You didn't create that, and now like you've fallen off the spiritual wagon. You didn't do enough good spiritual practices to prevent the cancer. It's like, okay, it's here, and now I can embrace and work with it and shift the way I'm thinking about it so that my experience of going through that healing process isn't as anxiety provoking, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, it's like understanding sort of the not critical thinking, because critical thinking has another meaning, like
self-criticism,
criticizing thinking,
right. Yes.
as really not being useful. It's very, ego driven. It's very much the self-conscious that is driving that type of thought. And so I'm wondering what you're thinking about this, but I often tell my patients, well, if you don't like the thought, don't invest time in the thought, because it's like the job of thoughts is to basically keep thinking, because we're much more complex than just our thoughts, and thoughts can be repetitive. And most negative thinkers or self-negative people who talk negatively to themselves, it's a cyclical, non-stop kind of bashing and breaking themselves down and blaming themselves. So, I've to be aware that, oh, this is that voice that's defeating me. Well, it's not true. It's not a true voice, because I am so much bigger than, and so much more whole than what these thoughts would have me think, or how I choose to interpret those thoughts, basically. Right. So do you see it that way? Or how do you deal with?
Absolutely. The first thing that I really try to help the clients and my students to see is that thoughts are not real.
Right.
We tend to believe that they are. In fact, we're not even aware that we believe that they are. There's just an unconscious assumption that what I think is real and it's true.
Yeah.
But we know that that's not correct, because we could think, of a rainbow colored carrot doing jumping jacks. I mean, I can have all kinds of weird thoughts and none of them are real or true. So why are there certain thoughts that we believe are absolutely true, hook, line, and sinker? And it's really a matter of habit, right? If I was, if this was a book, this is my planner, but this was a book and I was reading it constantly every day, every night, whatever book that might be, right? If someone's reading a horror book, a horror story, which I don't touch with a 10-foot pole, then they're going to be filled with all of that kind of imagery and way of perceiving and those emotions. And that's what we're doing, is we're kind of reinvesting in, a lot of people say it's like an old program, right? We're running it over and over again, and then perceiving the world through that experience. But I could just take the book and put it down and stop reading it, And after a while, that's going to fade out of my experience, especially if I'm focusing on something else.
Mhm.
And what I talk about in the book, the first foundation is learning to focus on presence, on
Right.
what is real here right now. So
Yeah.
when we come into the present moment with our senses,
Mhm.
like okay, what's real here is like I have, the camera up here that I'm looking at, and you on the screen. I mean, that's what I'm seeing. I'm sitting in a chair. I'm wearing this top. These things I can touch, I can see,
Yeah.
I can hear, and reorienting to this as this is what's real right here, right now, not what's going on. We point to our head in the Western culture, but wherever the mind is, it isn't
Exactly.
necessarily located in the brain. Um, this is what's real right here, right now, instead of the mind ruminating over something in the past or projecting into the future, which a lot of people are doing right now, right? We're projecting all kinds of fearful things into the future. Right here, right now, this is where our calm lies.
Mhm.
This is where our awakening lies,
Mhm.
because we're only living in the present moment ever.
And our power.
And our power,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Our power to change, our power to transform, our power to choose right here.
Yeah. No, I think that yeah, you say that perfectly. I totally agree. And it's the thing, if you engage the thoughts, and anxiety is more about the future, right? Than the past. The past is more regret and what if I had, and no, that kind of thing, right? That's not necessarily, I guess it could cause anxiety, but I personally see anxiety as a future forecast that isn't accurate, because we know that we delete, we change, we distort, we do
Yes.
all kinds of things with our thoughts, right?
Right.
That's why our perception is so limited. Yeah. Yeah, so the present is really where it's happening.
Yes, the present is where life is happening. Our life is always happening in the present.
Mhm.
And we don't usually realize that because we usually aren't present. We're
Right.
usually walking around thinking about something else. Where anxiety can come from the past is if we're going back over and over again to a time that caused us anxiety,
Right.
right? We're watching TV, or which is fine if that, but we're doing so much of not being here that it actually can be very difficult for people to learn to be here.
Mhm.
um, Unfamiliar. um, it
Yes.
might appear boring. it's
Right.
it's it's boring because we aren't actually really here. When we're really here and really present, the richness and aliveness of life as it is starts to unfold for us. And I especially like to take people out into nature. That's a big part of how I work with people as an ecotherapist.
Mm.
um, that when we're really fully present with nature and we're engaging all of our senses,
Yes.
the aliveness and the beauty and the magic
Mhm.
of this present moment on this planet starts to unfold for people. And there's a renewal and an increase of energy and a sense of joy and a sense of calm that can come from all of that.
Mhm. Yeah, no, I think that's very important to it's also what you're surrounding yourself with. If you do that, you are bringing a different experience
Yes.
literally to you, that is in the present moment, but that is a chosen calming experience, and very much more connected. So how do you see panic attacks? Like I was reading a little bit about it, understanding that it's also a body takeover, that the mind then starts to notice that the body is experiencing all these symptoms, and that adds to the whole cycle of anxiety. How are you either seeing it or helping people get out of the so-called panic attack or anxiety attack?
Yeah. My experience with working with that is it always starts with thoughts. We're usually not aware of them. And when it leads to a panic attack is when the thoughts have really taken off like a runaway train. They've just kind of gone off out of control and unconsciously usually.
Hi, I'm Dr. Manon Bolliger, and I wanted to take a moment to thank you for watching these podcasts. If you haven't subscribed, please do. Also, feel free to leave comments and like it. This way, more people get to find out about this work and about other choices for health. So I think it's really important that we all share this information. I have a free gift to you. It's a 7-sequence email that has tips for every day, and it's a little insight about how to live your life when it comes to health. And it's very much built on how I managed to overcome stage 4 cancer and what it took. So I would love you to have this, and thank you once again for listening to these podcasts.
To the point where it starts then a response in the body of the sympathetic nervous system that it's like once the momentum is going, it's going to then probably build until it's reached its conclusion, right? So that starts the heart racing, that starts the tendency to keep inhaling and not exhaling. I found that is quite common with panic attacks, that like I keep inhaling and I can't get enough air because you're not exhaling, so there's no possible way to get any more air. So that's one of the ways, like physically I work with people with anxiety attacks, is beyond the thought, is like, okay, let's work on the exhalation, lengthening the exhalation, coming into that, because that's going to give you the capacity to inhale more. But so it's really important for the clients I have that have panic attacks to be working with what are the thoughts that they're indulging in, or they're repeating, or they're investing in. Like, I think you'd use the word investment, you know. It reminds me of a quote from Reverend Michael Bernard Beckwith, who I love, that what you appreciate appreciates. So what you invest in grows, right? If you're investing in certain thoughts, they are going to grow like interest, and they're going to multiply and accumulate. So it's disrupting that pattern. So it's a combination of having then practices to calm them when the panic attack is happening, but to try and head it off before it happens. Like, oh, I'm going into that kind of train of thought.
Right.
And I need to start installing a new program, a new way of thinking, and start making that more of a habit. And that takes a while. You know, it's going to take a little while to shift that. And bringing them back into the present moment is also part of how I do that, and into their body. Yeah. So that's a second principle, is becoming embodied, because usually when a panic attack is happening, we've left the body. Yeah. And like you said, you know, if you start feeling the panic attack coming on, then you start to have anxiety about the fact that the panic attack is coming on, and that ramps up the sympathetic nervous system even more. And a lot of times people sort of go out of the body, meaning that they're way up in their head now. They're not present. They're not in here. And then the body can become kind of panicked itself about the fact that you're not really here. Because if you're not here, then that means you're not really paying attention to what's actually going on and making sure that we're safe in the physical world. So all of these things sort of amplify each other, right? So it's all starting with coming back to the thought processes, in my experience, and helping to put new ways of thinking onto different situations, staying in the present, staying in the body. And I have a whole process of things that we do, like grounding and centering and all that, which people have probably heard of, some of them. There's something else I was going to say, but and then the breath work techniques and all of that. So
yeah, because I find that people who go into their heads, they think that if they could only solve the thought, and it's like, you're not going to solve it with the same mind that's allowed it to go.
That's absolutely right.
You know, down that path. So it's okay. No. We need to shift. And I do a lot of body work. So in my practice, so it's like bringing people back to their bodies and the breath, and putting them into parasympathetic, and then and then seeing, I see all these thoughts, and I just see them. Okay, identify them as Oh, here they are on their what's that animal that goes in circles? I forgot. You
Oh,
know,
a
the
dog following its own tail kind of
or
thing.
the yeah, exactly that, or those little ones that are running around in cages, they
Oh,
go
oh, oh, like hamsters on wheels.
hamster wheel.
Yeah. Yeah.
I see those and I go, okay, well, those are the thoughts. Don't even solve them. Put them aside and get back to your body.
Right.
And when you're centered, I don't know, for me, it's like there may be some figuring things out. Like there are things to solve, and that's what the thoughts can do. They can lead, put a list, do it there. But I say once you've done the list and you've gone as far as the mind that way can do it, the intellect can figure it out, there's things you can't go further. You just have to let them
Right.
sit. So the moment you notice that you're in that thing, it's like, oh, okay, I've done that. And thank you very much for sharing with me, but we're not going to go that road because at this moment, we're not receiving more insight.
Right.
And I feel like that's when you're in the present, you actually receive insight rather
Absolutely.
than follow the train of thoughts.
Yeah, I agree. I think insight tends to arise spontaneously when
Yes.
we're receptive and we're open and we're not expecting.
Yeah.
But that brings up for me, with everything going on in the world right now, like you're saying, there's things to be solved, but there's only so many things that we can solve. Like we really can't, at least I can't personally solve the fires that are happening right now. Now, there are things that I can do, whether that might be, helping out firefighter organizations or prayers and visualization or whatever. But ultimately, I can't figure it out. I cannot. There's not something or the pandemic. I can't. There's not a place where I can get it all figured out and solved.
Mhm.
So embracing the not knowing
Mhm.
actually is very calming for me. Like
Mhm.
I don't know, and
Right.
that's okay to
Yeah.
let there be not knowing.
Yeah.
Because when I cling to, I need to know, that's going to drive my anxiety because there's no possible way that I can know all of that or
Right.
figure it out. And to me, that comes to, like, I have 7 keys in the book. The last one is surrender, is really offering it over to something much greater than myself. And through surrender, we can experience serenity within, because I can't figure out all the problems of the world. I can't shoulder all of that. I can't take on all the emotions of everybody out there, or all the animals or plants or whatever it is. So when I surrender that to something much bigger than me, then I can have that sense of calm and peace here in the present moment. And then I figure out the question that you're saying is, okay, what is to be solved or can be solved in my life right now? Or what action can I take? I talk about empowering action in the book. Can I do right now? And I let that be enough, because that's what I can do.
Right.
I can't figure it all out. I can't fix it all.
Yeah.
That's only going to cause me distress if I try to.
Yeah, no, I agree with you again. Yeah. No, I do think it's through surrender in that sense, and trust, right? And I
Yes.
think that often with anxiety, there's no trust, because there's the belief that you're actually in control of everything, and you're not.
That's true. And trust is big.
Yeah.
I talk in the book a little bit about, like, weightlifting,
Mhm.
that building trust and is like learning to lift weights. Like, you're not going to make a leap to just completely trusting the universe right away if you don't have a foundation in that kind of inner faith and inner spiritual connection to I call it the divine, whether it's God or whatever you call that, right? So you start with recognizing that there are actually things that all of us trust in every day without even thinking about it. We trust that if I turn the faucet, the water will come on. We trust that the seasons are going to change. We trust that the sun is going to rise even if it's behind clouds. There's a lot of things that we do inherently trust in that happen, right? That if I turn on a switch, the light's going to come on. So using that as a foundation to build, like, okay, I trust in that. and then looking at what else do I trust in, and what's a little bit of a reach. Can I trust that my friend will return my phone call in a reasonable amount of time? I can probably trust that. All right. And then we look at lifting heavier weights, like, so, trusting that enough income flows in if I take this action and this action. So it's building that up, and then eventually seeing, for me, how spirit always supports me in my life. The more I practice that trust, the more I put faith in something bigger than me, because the planet knows how to run itself without me interfering. The seasons know how to change. The trees know what to do. The solar system knows how to rotate and spin and all of that. So I think I can trust in something bigger to have, to care for my life and guide my life. The more I have faith in it.
Yeah, and I actually love how you've explained that, because I've often, with my patients, had these discussions where they say, well, are you religious, or do you belong to a faith? And it's like, my answer is no, because I don't. I mean, I was raised a certain way, but it's and I call it spirit. It's and it's divine. I use that word because it feels like we are part of something bigger. And it's like, why would we exclude ourselves from the incredible organization of all things here on earth? Like,
Right.
the water flowing, all of that. And if we see ourselves as part of all that, and I've had a few close calls to death. That could be, it didn't work out that way. But the thing is that in the most scary time, I felt very relaxed. It's not quite the right word. It's almost like surrendered to that. It's not in my hands anymore. But the very next step is, it's like I can do what I can only just be utterly present and do the next step. But what's going to happen will be what happens. And that's the perfect thing to happen. It was like, it was at a state of like almost not able to judge anymore. That yeah, I should be or I shouldn't be here. There was actually no attachment left. It was a very powerful experience. Yeah. And and I guess the thing, if you don't have an experience like that, how do you go into trusting? And I think that's why I love the way you explain nature, because everyone can see that, and then we kind of create a universe where we're separate, and we're not.
Absolutely. And I think that's a big part of what's causing suffering on the planet, is how we have disconnected ourselves and separated ourselves from the very land, the very planet that we live on, that we are dependent on for all of our life. And talking more about that sense of trusting something bigger, when we go out into nature, it's beautiful. And that when we look at it, it's not perfect. I mean, that's part of its beauty, is it's not perfect. Like, it's dirty, it's messy, like there's debris everywhere, right? I mean, that's what happens. Branches fall and leaves fall, and there's death all around you. And that is also part of life. Like, that's what's giving life to the forest, is actually the cycle of things dying and then giving resources and nurturance for the new life to grow. And that's happening in our lives all the time.
Right.
There's parts of, I mean, literally, the cells are dying and then new cells are growing, right? But then parts of our cells also are ready to release, like the leaves from the tree. And when we embrace that process, there's this beautiful flow of life and that increase of trust, seeing it happen in nature, feeling it in ourselves. And you seem like you want to say something.
No, I'm listening. I'm listening to you. No, I'm very excited.
Yeah, it's to me, there's just like, I take people out in nature and there's always lessons and gifts. It's as if the birds and the trees and the ants, they all know what we need, and they bring it to us in that experience when we go out there and we immerse deeply into connecting in nature. There's always messages, and it's profound. So that's one of the ways that I help people build that sense of trust in something greater.
And it's so true, because when we're open to it, our perception changes. Different things
That's right.
come into our perceptions, and what people might call as like separate incidences, to those who see it differently, see it like divine timing, or perfect timing, in the sense that there's no coincidence. And so
Right.
it's funny how our vocabulary changes with our perception, depending on how much we are allowing ourselves to experience life.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Anyway, well, Connie, it was really wonderful having you here. Is there any last statement you'd like to leave with everyone?
Well, it's been a delight, Dr. M, and I want to remind people that you have what you need within you. That inner connection to something greater and the divine, and your own inner wisdom, and the divine intelligence in every cell of your body, all of that, and your own emotions themselves, all of that is ready to, and is right in this moment, giving you gifts and giving you guidance and giving you insight, if we can learn the language of how to listen to it and how to trust in that inner knowing. So yes, please know that that is within you already. It's already there. And it's just a matter of being able to access it and know how to listen.
Thank you.
It's been a delight being on your podcast. Thank you so much, Dr. M.
Thank you for joining us at the Healers Café with Dr. Manon. For more information, go to drmanonbolliger.com.